in thick and fast here. So we finally have the WebKit exploit released, and this is one that has been highly anticipated for a while because we had heard that there was a WebKit exploit in development. I did warn that, take things with a grain of salt because 9 times out of 10, most of these WebKit vulnerabilities never go anywhere. However, this one has actually come to fruition here into a real exploit. However, it's not quite the smoking gun that many people were hoping for because it's not going to work up to the latest firmwares on the PS4 and PS5, but it should allow new firmwares that did not have access to WebKit exploits beforehand to now be able to jailbreak with the web browser. So this is the repo here by Nathan Fargo. We've also got UFM42 and Dr. Yen Yen as contributors here. Now, this current version is only for firmware 9.00 because presumably that was the firmware they were testing it on, because it's easier to test things if you have, a firmware that has a previous jailbreak. Just makes it easier for developing and testing. So that's all that's supported by this repo right now. However, you can see the vulnerability scope does say 6.0 up to 13.52 on the PS4 and 1.00 to 13.40. That just means the vulnerability is present on those firmwares. However, the vulnerability does not seem to be exploitable in all of those firmwares. So it's only exploitable in firmwares from 6.0 to 11.50 on the PS4 and 1.00 to 8.60 on the PS5. Now, there is also a caveat for PS5, which is that PS5s has ASLR, address space layout randomization, and that needs to be defeated either through a heap shaping trick or a separate leak bug, and the expected vtable pointer can be recovered before the native crash path. So that needs to be defeated. ASLR needs to be defeated on PS5 in order for it to be usable on the PS5s in those firmwares. So that is something that is still to be done. We also have supported by this repository. Again, it only works on 9.00. That's for the PS4. Currently, that's the only thing that's supported with this particular version. So it says newer WebKit versions on PS4 11.5x, so firmwares above 11.50 to the latest firmware, and PS5s on 9.00 to the latest firmware, redesigned the CSS font face get set property handling and introduced a M properties or CSS connection. Because of this and other layout changes, the M feature setting read/write primitive used by this repository is no longer usable on firmware versions above the ranges listed here. And again, on PlayStation 5, vtable checks and WebKit ASLR prevent this repository's chain from working unless a separate ASLR defeat and vtable recovery workaround is found. So it requires a separate ASLR defeat method for PS5s in order to get it to work on the PlayStation 5. So yes, we have a new WebKit exploit, but there are significant caveats, as it's going to work on PS4 at least up to 11.50 it seems, which is great because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure the previous WebKit exploit only works up to firmware 9.60 on the PS4, so that would be a lot of new firmwares that would be jailbreakable through the web browser, like 10.x and 11.x firmwares will be jailbreakable on the PS4. And then again on PS5, if we get the ASLR defeat method, then we could go from only being able to jailbreak up to 5.50 with the web browser to being able to jailbreak up to 8.60 with the web browser, which would include all 6.x, 7.x, and 8.x firmwares that would be jailbreakable through the web browser. So that would be a significant improvement, but we need that ASLR defeat method to be able to get that for the PS5. So that's the situation right now. Now, there was also a technical write-up that was released alongside this. So this is from Nathan Fargo and UFM42 from CSS font face to ARW, a PlayStation WebKit exploit write-up. And this goes into all of the detail on how the exploit was achieved, how the vulnerability was exploited. So if you want all the technical details, it's all available here. The link to this will be down in the video description. And of course, once you load the exploit successfully, you should get something that looks like this, showing use after free achieved, an achieved arbitrary read-write at the bottom when it has been loaded successfully. If you want to get this running on your console, you can of course go to the code here and download it as a zip file, although it only works on firmware 9.00 for now for testing. Then you just extract that folder to your computer, you open it up, then just right click in the location of your host file and open in terminal, or you can just open up a command prompt window and navigate to this location with the host file. And then we simply want to type in python -- version to make sure you have Python installed. If it comes up with a version of Python, then you do have it installed. Otherwise, you'll have to go to the Microsoft Store and install Python. And then we can type in python host.py, and that will simply run the web server, which is now hosting the exploit on your computer, and you can then access it on your console. But you would essentially just go onto the internet browser and then simply head to HTTPS. Make sure you put in HTTPS:// the IP address of your computer with :443 at the end. So then we just press R2 to head to the site where we have the directory listing, and we can select the public folder, and then that should initiate the exploit there. And then we just wait a few seconds. It only takes a couple of seconds there, and you can see the exploit is now loaded. We have the userland exploit, use after free achieved. We also have arbitrary read-write achieved, achieved ASLR, achieved ROP, and initiated the syscalls and found 298 syscalls. So we have the userland exploit fully loaded here. Now, it did not work the first time. I did get a few not enough free system memory errors when trying to load WebKit exploits. I'm sure people who used WebKit exploits back in the day are very familiar with that error message. When a WebKit exploit fails, the userland exploit fails, you just get that not enough free system memory error that pops up on screen. So I did get that a few times before it loaded successfully, so you may have to run it a few times before you get it to load successfully. But so after many years now, we finally have a new WebKit exploit for the PS4, which should also work on the PS5 if we can get some way to defeat ASLR on PS5 as well. So again, just a quick update there, a new WebKit